Good morning, Burt. How are you doing today?
Arrow, great to be talking with you again.
Man, your storytelling, dude, I'm so attracted to it because you dig beneath the surface of what we think we know, and then you give us something that we now know, and it's like, oh my God, what a conversation starter.
Most definitely. This project, originally began because no one had written a book about Shemp Howard at the time we started there. There were books about Moe, Howard, Curly, Larry Fine, even Joe Besser and Joe DeRita, who followed Shemp in later years, but nothing about Shemp. So that was a good way to start. I thought it was just going to be a simple biography project, but then just when I started to dig in, I found that of all the entertainment groups of the 20th century that still have a following today, there are really very few, if any, who have such a clouded history of misinformation as the Three Stooges. And it was a matter of, sorting out what was real, what's been written, that's true, what's not, what can be backed up by the facts. And it became quite a project.
My dad used to, because I would always ask him about Shemp, and he would always say, there's not much out there. And I'd say, well, why isn't there much out there? And he'd say, stop trying to be a know-it-all. And it would say, what? No, I really wanted to know more about him because he was always that great mystery.
That's the thing. The Three Stooges, again, three of them were brothers. There was Shemp. Moe was 2 years younger. Curly, whose name was Jerome, was 8 years younger than Shemp. When the group started, it was Moe and Shemp. They were in vaudeville. They did a blackface act. They ripped off material from a popular African American vaudeville group, and they did a little blackface routine. They weren't very successful. Then they hooked up with a childhood friend of Moe's named Ted Healy. And Healy was a popular Broadway and vaudeville song and dance man, a comedian and singer. They were hired as his stooges, which they didn't call them that at the time. But what they would do is Healy would be singing a song and somebody in the audience, one of the stooges, would interrupt, come up on stage, and do a little comedy routine, which would end with Healy slapping the person in the face hard enough and loud enough so it could be heard in the back row of the theater.
So it was real?
Yeah, it was real. From the beginning, Moe and Shemp were getting knocked all over the stage. Now, one of the problems with the history and the history telling is that most of the books about the Three Stooges, documentaries, are all done by people who are uber fans of the Stooges, part of the Stooges fan community. I gotta say, I'm not part of that group. I grew up with the Stooges. I loved them. I'm not putting anybody down to say that I sort of outgrew them, moved on from there. But the people that wrote these books based all their books on Moe's autobiography, what he wrote at the end of his life. He died before he finished it. His daughter finished it for him. Wow. And the problem was that Moe filled this book with a lot of self-aggrandizing misinformation, often at the expense of Shemp. Because when you look at it, in these years, Shemp was the star of the act. They ultimately quit Ted Healy, and Shemp ultimately quit the Stooges. Moe says because Shemp was afraid of Ted Healy. Moe said Shemp was a bedwetter and afraid of getting slapped by Ted Healy. But once you look into the facts, and once I went into the old trade papers and reporting at the time, you find out that Shemp was a star of the show.
Yeah.
And he demanded more money because he said, I'm basically Ted Healy's partner here. I want more money. And Ted Healy said, no, I pay you three guys a certain amount. If you want more money, change the split with your buddies there. And when they wouldn't do it, Shemp quit. And Shemp went on to a 12-year solo career in shorts and films alongside people like Jimmy Stewart, John Wayne, W.C. Fields, William Powell, Myrna Loy, Marlene Dietrich. Made 5 films with Abbott and Costello. Performed with the East Side Kids. Performed with Huntz Hall, who became his protege. Huntz Hall from the Bowery Boys says that he learned everything from Shemp. Shemp taught him comedy, and Shemp was a great influence on his career. Anyway, Shemp had a great history that has really been overshadowed by the fact that he's been written off because of the fact that, Moe kind of said, Shemp was really a nobody. We brought him in when Curly got sick.
Wow. Wow. See, I first came across Shemp in the Westerns because my parents were really big into Western movies. And then when my dad explained it to me, that he was part of the Stooges, I mean, to me, that was like a Paul McCartney moment. You mean he was part of the Beatles? What are you talking about? And that changed everything because all of a sudden it's like all of these actors have a pre-story. And that's the thing about it. That's what I love about books like yours is that you're giving us the story.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's sort of rewriting history in a way. I mean, this is sort of sorting out. I just watched the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Oh.
And they say when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. Well, the legend has been printed for the last 40 years, and now it's time to print the facts. And I had to kind of go through it and find out the real story. And it's not a lesser story than the myth. It's a greater story. Especially when you find out that. Shemp went back to the Stooges. He had his own successful solo career, but he went back because of family. His younger brother had a severely debilitating stroke, and the Three Stooges were at a crossroads where, that might be the end of the act. Mo, his younger brother, would stop working, and Shemp gave up his career, signed a contract saying, look, this is temporary. Until you find a replacement, I'll do this. But it wound up being permanent, until the end of Shemp's life, when Shemp died young, probably from the effects of all the slaps and the hits that he took.
I was wondering.
So it's a great, they were family. They lived near each other in the same neighborhood. They had family events together. They were family people, and you can't put that aside, no matter what jealousy that Mo may have had for Shemp. And also you also look at what Shemp sacrificed in rejoining the Three Stooges. When you look at, he joined the Stooges in 46. He died in 1955. This is around the time when television was starting to become very popular, and you had shows like Car 54, Where Are You?, where you had ugly mugs, like the Nat Hiken characters that were in these films. Shemp would have been great in any of these TV series. Would have loved to see him in Guys and Dolls. He played gangsters in so many movies, comic gangsters. He would have been great on stage in Guys and Dolls or something like that. There was a lot that we missed out on because Shemp, took the hit and went with the Three Stooges. But then again, as somebody mentioned, well, he might not have become a legend. He wouldn't be the legend that he is, because even though he's a lesser legend than the others, he still is part of that Three Stooges legend.
I've always thought that he's got the perfect face for Hollywood because you don't forget it. When he goes into a role, you believe in his role, but you don't forget it. It's like when I saw the book cover, I'm going, holy crap! I'm gonna have a lot of memories in this book.
It's the face of film comedy, I called him. I mean, Shemp was voted the ugliest man in Hollywood in the mid-40s, and he was proud of it.
Yeah.
Back then, people had faces, and that was part of we think of Shemp as this phobic, scaredy cat. That was the role he played in the Stooges. But before that, he never played that role. He played comic gangsters. He played big brain braggarts. He was so funny with his ad libs. He played the henpecked husband, and he had this one routine that he did in several films where he put on little round foggy glasses and acted as if he was blind. And he would do some great slapstick walking into doors and walls. There's a fight scene he had with Broderick Crawford where he couldn't see what he was doing, and he was hilarious. I mean, he was just as good a dancer as Curly, just as nimble, just as good as a comedian, a total pro when it came to someone who did his 10,000 hours of practice on vaudeville stages and on Broadway. He was just as good, but he looked like a man. He had that face. He wasn't like a cherub like Curly was.
Yeah. Right here in my notes, it says he looked like a real guy, like my dad or my neighbor. He was a real guy.
Yeah. And he was the only one of the Stooges who could survive and could excel on his own. Mo, for all his aspirations to being a serious actor, really could only be Mo. He did a couple of roles toward the end of his life in the 1970s or late 60s, and he still was Mo, being one of, as a stooge, really. Curly was Curly. Larry was just, part of the act. Shemp was the only one who was a real seasoned, very, versatile actor and performer. He was the only one who could stand on his own.
Can you imagine being on the set with Shemp and Abbott and Costello?
They say, and this, this is funny. He was in a film called It Ain't Hay, and this was a Damon Runyon film that Abbott and Costello starred in, and he was playing a really like a Guys and Dolls type character. And he had a scene at the beginning of the film with two other characters, and he was doing some ad-libbing. And they say that Abbott and Costello were off the set, and they heard the crew and everybody laughing hysterically. And Lou Costello walked over and said, "What's going on here?" And they said, "Oh, Shemp is really funny." And that Lou Costello said, "Shemp, you got to understand, I'm the star of the show. We can't have anybody be funnier than me. So just go with the script." And that happened more than once. There were witnesses to his work on The Bank Dig with W.C. Fields. And they said they cut out a lot of his funny stuff because he was just as funny as W.C. Fields, and they didn't want to distract from the star of the film.
See, I was wondering about that because, when you got that much talent in the same room, something's going to kind of ruffle up. And it makes me wonder, though, why didn't somebody pick Shemp up and team up with him?
Well, he did. He teamed up with Lon Chaney Jr. At one point. And if I mentioned that, there came a time when Abbott and Costello were so popular that Universal couldn't put out Abbott and Costello pictures fast enough. So they started doing Abbott and Costello pictures without Abbott and Costello. And at one point, there's a film called San Antonio Rose, where Shemp was paired up with Lon Chaney Jr., better known as the Wolfman from the horror movies. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of the Abbott and Costello team, except for the fact that Lon Chaney Jr. was not funny at all. He was scary, and he was slapping Shemp around. You watch this film now, and you wince every time he hits Shemp. I mean, he's worse than Ted Healy, worse than Moe. And it was frightening. But then the next picture that Shemp made without Lon Chaney, it was called Private Buckaroo. And it was sort of a take on Buck Privates, the film that made Abbott and Costello so famous. But there's no Abbott and Costello, but the Andrews sisters are in it, just as they were in all the Abbott and Costello movies. And that's the closest you see to a starring role for Shemp. It's really worth finding, because Shemp is the star of this film, and he's really funny. He dances, he does slapstick, he does comedy, and he shows just what a versatile performer he was.
Do you feel that you're a historian, or do you feel like you're more of a journalist bringing the story forward to this generation?
Well, I'm a journalist. I'm a writer. I produce documentaries, and I just really dig great stories.
Yeah.
One of the problems I have is that a lot of the stories I find are about people that are not so well known. I did a documentary on, Chris Montez, the singer, or Neil Innes, who was known as the seventh member of Monty Python. And, they have great stories. Somebody like Shemp has a great story. Now, luckily, with somebody like Shemp, you mentioned his name, and a young person working for a publisher will have at least heard of Shemp. And so, at one point, that's really why I started a Marlon Brando book, because my agent, Lee Sobel, who's almost a collaborator in coming up with, in coming up with these ideas, said, you've really got to do a book about a person that someone has heard of. So people know who you're writing about. So Shemp, in this case, was someone that everybody knows, but nobody really knew a lot about. And so, yeah, I think, I hate using the term, storyteller. I am a journalist. I love doing the research. I love digging into these rabbit holes and finding connections and finding things that surprise me. And so yeah, I'm more of a researcher and writer.
Can you imagine if Brando and Shemp would have teamed up? I mean, would he have made Shemp a stronger actor, or would he have worked on Brando to bring out a little bit of comedy?
Well, check out the film Bedtime Story with Marlon Brando. May have mentioned this. This is a film that Brando made in about 1965, written by Paul Henning, co-written by Paul Henning, who created Green Acres. So you can't go wrong there. And Brando does a comic role where he's almost like Jerry Lewis.
Whoa. A
slapstick comedy role. He's really hilariously funny. And to see him and Shemp together, they would probably make a great team. Because Bud Abbott once said, Bud Abbott, who was one of the great comedy straight men of all time, said of Shemp, he's probably the greatest comedian out there, but they've never hooked him up with a good straight man, and that was always the problem. He never was teamed up with the right person, although they tried.
One of the reasons why I really love this book being released right now is because of Antenna TV and We TV and these streaming networks, because the younger adults are watching these shows. They just don't know the stories. What they're doing is they're hitting Google real quickly, and it's like what you said. You get the surface level story.
Yeah. And that's the thing, where people are, the Three Stooges story started like 100 years ago. 1923, I think, is when Shemp and Moe really first started working in vaudeville. And you're watching this stuff now, and the Three Stooges stuff stands up today. Those shorts are really funny. Shemp's shorts stand up. When I was watching the Three Stooges as a kid in the early 1960s, I didn't know that these shorts were 30 years old. They seemed, they seemed brand new, and I think the same thing can happen today. And I think there's a longevity to the Stooges. There's a reason why there is such a large Stooges fan base today, because it's a kind of comedy that just transcends time. It's just they're timeless.
Yeah. One of my favorite pages inside your book, the script for the Baltimore show. Oh my God, I have read that over and over again, because to me it's like you've taken me out of 2024 and replanted me somewhere else.
Yeah. And you can find, it's a longer interview. You can find that on YouTube. It's on YouTube and you can hear it. It's the only time Shemp has been interviewed. It's the only time you really hear him talking as a person, not as a character. And what do they talk about? They talk about getting hit in the face for real.
See, that shocks me. I didn't realize that it was real, because I mean they hit each other in football and pro wrestling. I guess they hit each other, but I just didn't expect the actors to be doing it.
Yeah, and it's funny. Moe's daughter, who co-wrote the book, who finished Moe's autobiography, also wrote a book about Curly. And in the book about Curly, she talks about standing off stage, watching Curly as a child when she was young, watching the act. And she said she would wince every time Moe slapped Curly, because you could see the spittle flying from Curly's mouth. And it really was really hard. And she said it was painful to watch. Nick Santamaria, who's a show business historian who wrote the quintessential book on Abbott and Costello, talked about, he told me that his father saw the Three Stooges live in the late 1940s. And he was like, wow, what must have been great? And he said, no, it was really hard to watch.
Wow. Because
the violence on this stage was real. There weren't sound effects, and they were hitting each other really hard. These guys were doing it as they got older. They said Larry Fine had calluses on the left side of his cheek and onto his neck. Now, some say it was because he played violin, but others say it's because that was where he kept getting hit all the time by Moe.
Wow. What you've included in this book are interviews with fans, filmmakers. I mean, you went 100% all the way around to make sure that everybody had a voice in this story.
Yeah, you want to find, not just the people who were influenced by him. I mean, I have interviews and material from family members, et cetera, but even the family members, they're getting the story that their parents and grandparents wanted told. That's the thing. You had to like dig in and find, contemporaneous interviews, going back to the Columbia archives and finding interviews with the directors who worked with the Stooges. And, people came forward to me, a guy who wrote a great piece for a small comedy journal, whose father had seen Shemp perform in the Brooklyn Navy Yards during a bond drive during World War II. And people that knew Shemp and talk about that. Shemp had this reputation as this phobic, scared of the world person. And that's really because that was his persona on screen. Yeah, Shemp had panic attacks. That's what I narrowed that down to. Shemp was a sensitive artist. But this thing where he was afraid of dogs, well, he had 2 dogs. Afraid of the water, well, he used to fish off the Santa Monica Pier all the time. And I have photos of him when he went deep sea fishing with the U.S. Navy, and he's holding his catch and didn't look any worse for wear and tear. Scared of flying? Well, a lot of people were scared of flying. People took trains back then. He had his fears, but he wasn't, I don't think he was this phobic scaredy cat that he's been characterized. And, it's a caricature of who Shemp really was. I mean, when Shemp moved to Hollywood, his brothers were already here working with the Three Stooges. He moved out in 1937. He opened a nightclub 2 blocks from his house. The other guys didn't open it. What phobic person opens a nightclub and hangs out there every night and tries out his material on strangers? I mean, Shemp was a real, man's man. He was afraid of violence, yet his favorite sport was boxing. And what he would do was, he was well known at the fights in LA because he would sit ringside and he would emulate the fighters in the street. He would be punching along with the fighters from his seat. And then the cornermen would come and wave towels over him, to kind of entertain the crowd. But his daughter-in-law, who is still alive, says she remembered being invited to the fights with Shemp and they sat ringside, and he handed out newspapers to everyone. And she said, why are you giving us, why are we going to read the papers? He goes, no, that's to hold over your head when the blood starts flying. And it was like as if they were at a Gallagher show. And it was like, why, if he was so afraid of things, why would he be sitting there to be have blood rain down on him at his favorite sport? That's actually how Shemp died. He died after attending one of these boxing matches, a great prize fight. He was returning home in a taxi cab with two of his friends, telling a joke, smoking a cigar, when suddenly he stopped with a smile on his face and sort of slumped over. And his pal said, "Shemp, what are you doing? You're burning my suit."
Oh, God.
See, and as Billy West said, what a stooge way to go.
You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you, sir.
Oh, I appreciate it, Errol. Thanks so much.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
You too. Take care, man.